Dominic Russo came home without warning. No one knew he was back. The mansion was silent, the way it had been for 14 months. But then he heard something. A sound coming from somewhere inside. His heart started to pound. By instinct, his hand reached for the gun at his side. Yet it wasn't the sound of danger. He didn't know what it was. He moved toward it, following the noise, both hands trembling. It was coming from the kitchen. He pushed the door open, and what he saw made his heart stop. Dominic Russo was a mafia boss, the head of the Russo family, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in New York. He controlled the ports, the underground casinos, and half the protection rackets in Manhattan. Men feared him. Enemies trembled when they heard his name. Everything he touched turned to gold, or turned to blood. But power couldn't bring back what he'd lost. His wife, Isabella, was murdered, shot dead in broad daylight. The Mendez cartel, a rival family, wanted to send a message. They ambushed her car as she was picking up their 3 daughters from preschool. Isabella used her own body as a shield. She died on the spot. The girls survived. Not a scratch on them. Dominic was in Chicago handling business when he got the call. At her funeral, something shattered inside his 3 little girls, Lucia, Valentina, and Mia, 4 years old, identical triplets with black curls and their mother's brown eyes. They stopped talking. All 3 of them. At the same time, Lucia used to read books to her dolls. Valentina asked why about everything. Mia sang songs she made up in the bath, at meals, while she played. Now there was nothing. Silence. 14 months of absolute silence. Not a single word, not a laugh, not even a sob you could hear. Only 3 little girls holding hands, staring into empty space like ghosts. Dominic did what any father with limitless resources would do. He spent millions trying to fix what was broken. Child psychologists from the best hospitals, specialist doctors from Europe, one therapy after another. He took them to Disney World, to the Hamptons, to a private island in the Caribbean. He bought them puppies, ponies, built them a toy castle in the garden. Nothing worked. The girls stayed locked inside themselves, silent together, as if they'd made a pact with grief. He did something else too. He hunted down the Mendez cartel. One by one, he made them pay in blood. It took him 3 months to wipe them off the map. But revenge didn't bring Isabella back, and it didn't make his daughters speak again. So Dominic did what broken men often do. He ran. He buried himself in his empire. 18 hours of work every day. A trip every week. Chicago, Miami, Las Vegas. Because sitting in that mansion, looking at 3 silent little girls, felt like drowning. His estate on Long Island had 15 bedrooms, a pool, a tennis court, a private beach. But it was the loneliest place on earth. And before we continue, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a like if you believe in second chances, and comment where you're watching from, because this story will show you that even in the darkest silence, love can find a way back. One evening, Rosa stood in the doorway of Dominic's study. She'd been with the Russo family for 15 years. She'd watched Dominic grow from a hot-headed young man into a powerful boss. She'd been at his side on his wedding day, on the day his children were born, and on the day Isabella lay in her coffin. But now, she was exhausted. "Boss, I need to talk to you." Dominic didn't look up from the pile of paperwork. "Speak." Rosa drew a deep breath. "I can't take care of this house and the 3 little girls by myself anymore. The house is too big. The girls need more care than I can give. I need to hire more people." Dominic still didn't look up. The pen in his hand kept signing documents Rosa didn't want to know the contents of. "Hire whoever you want, Rosa, but check their background thoroughly." His voice was empty, as if she'd just asked about buying more light bulbs. Rosa nodded and stepped out. She knew that was all she was going to get from this man. 3 days later, Elena Vasquez stood before a 3-meter-tall iron gate. She looked up. Security cameras were everywhere, at least 5 she could count. Maybe more she couldn't see. The gate opened slowly without anyone pressing a doorbell. They'd been watching her since the moment she got off the bus. Elena stepped inside. A stone-paved driveway led to a massive mansion. No, not a mansion. This was a fortress, a small kingdom hidden in Long Island. 2 men in black suits stood at the front door. They didn't smile. They didn't greet her. They simply stood there, arms folded, their eyes sweeping over Elena like airport scanners. She noticed the bulge curving beneath their suit jackets. Guns. Both of them carried guns. Elena swallowed. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She glanced to the left. A glossy black SUV was parked in the yard. Bulletproof glass. armored body. She'd seen this kind of vehicle in movies, the kind meant for presidents or mafia bosses. Go back, a voice in her head screamed. Go back, Elena. This isn't a place for someone like you. But she needed this job. She needed money to pay the lawyer for Miguel. She needed money to survive. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She kept walking. A man led her inside. The house was even more intimidating than she'd imagined. Ceilings soaring high, crystal chandeliers, marble floors so polished she could see herself in them. Everything was expensive. Everything was cold and quiet. Quiet in a way that squeezed the breath out of you. Rosa met her in the sitting room, a 55-year-old woman with silver hair and tired eyes that were still kind. She looked Elena up and down. You're Elena Vasquez? Yes, ma'am. Rosa pointed to the chair across from her. Sit. Elena sat. Her hands rested on her thighs, trying to keep them from shaking. Rosa was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, her voice low and blunt. Are you scared? Elena knew she wasn't asking about the job. She was asking about this place. About the men with guns. About the armored car. About everything Elena had seen since she stepped through the gate. Elena looked straight into Rosa's eyes. Yes, I'm scared. Rosa said nothing. But I've been scared of many things in my life. I'm still here. A moment passed. Then Rosa nodded slowly. For the first time, something like respect flickered in her eyes. You're hired. You start tomorrow. The staff room is downstairs. I'll explain the work later. For now, you should learn this house first. Elena stood. Rosa led her through the corridors, the sitting room, the dining room, the recreation room, the indoor pool. Every room was bigger than Elena's apartment in the Bronx. They were passing along the second-floor hallway when Elena heard a voice, cold, sharp, like a blade cutting through the air. Tell Santino if he doesn't pay within 48 hours, he won't need to pay anymore. Ever. Elena froze. All the blood in her body rushed to her heart. A man stepped out from the room at the end of the hall. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit so perfect it looked like it had been tailored down to every stitch. An angular face, a square jaw, and eyes. Eyes colder than anything Elena had ever seen. He was on the phone, but he stopped when he saw them. His gaze swept over Elena, quick, cold, as if she were a piece of furniture, something not worth remembering. Then he walked past without a word. Elena couldn't breathe until he disappeared around the corner. That's the boss, Dominic, Rosa said softly. You don't need to know much about him. Just do your job well and stay out of his way. Elena nodded. They kept going, but when they reached the staircase, Elena stopped. 3 little girls stood there, on the 5th step, holding hands, looking down, black curls, big round brown eyes, faces so identical Elena couldn't tell them apart. 3 small angels, yet their eyes were empty, like dolls. That's Lucia, Valentina, and Mia, Rosa said, her voice dropping. The boss's 3 little girls. They don't talk, to anyone. It's been 14 months. Elena looked at the 3 girls, and the 3 girls looked back at her. For the first time in 14 months, their eyes followed a stranger. Not with fear, but with something else. Curiosity. Elena didn't know why, but she felt that something had just changed. An invisible thread had just been tied, between her and those 3 silent little girls. She didn't know that thread would change everything. On her first day, Elena started work at 6 o'clock in the morning. She dusted shelves of books that seemed to go on forever. She vacuumed Persian rugs, worth more than everything she'd ever owned. She polished statues she didn't dare ask the price of. Rosa followed her from room to room. She didn't say a word. She only watched. The way Elena held the cloth, the way she moved, the way her eyes took in everything around her. Close to noon, they stopped in the second-floor corridor, near the room of the 3 little girls. Elena could feel the silence from inside, a heavy kind of silence, as if someone was trying not to breathe. Rosa spoke suddenly. Do you have experience with children? Elena stopped. The cloth in her hand froze in midair. Her eyes drifted into the distance, as if the question had yanked her back to somewhere far away. 3 years ago, the Bronx, a small auto repair shop on the corner of 17th Street. Her father, Antonio Vasquez, was wiping his hands with an oil-stained rag. He was the best mechanic in the neighborhood. Everyone knew him. Everyone loved him. He was decent. He worked hard. He'd never harmed anyone. But none of that mattered. 2 men walked into the shop that afternoon. They wanted protection money. They said this was Los Diablos territory. If you wanted to do business, you paid. Her father refused. He said he'd worked here for 20 years. He didn't owe anyone anything. They fired right there in front of the shop. 3 shots. Chest. Stomach. Head. Elena was on her way home after her shift at the cafe. She heard the gunshots from 2 blocks away. She ran. She ran as fast as she could, but when she got there, her father was already lying in a pool of blood. His eyes were still open, staring up at the sky, as if he were asking God why. Her mother couldn't take it. She collapsed. 6 months later, she was gone in her sleep. The doctor said it was a heart attack. Elena knew the truth. Her mother died of grief. Her heart broke, literally. Then came Miguel, her little brother, 19 years old. The boy only wanted to become an engineer. He'd never gotten into trouble, but someone needed a scapegoat. Someone needed someone to blame. They set Miguel up. Drugs in the trunk. A gun in the closet. He was sentenced to 10 years for a crime he didn't commit. Elena was left alone. 27 years old. No father, no mother. Her brother in prison. She worked 2 jobs, the cafe by day, cleaning offices at night. She went to college in the evenings, early childhood education. Every dollar she earned went toward hiring a lawyer for Miguel. 3 years. 3 years living with pain. 3 years waking up every morning and reminding herself she had to keep going. For Miguel, for the memory of her parents, because she didn't have the right to fall apart. Elena blinked and came back to the present. Rosa was still looking at her, waiting. "I do have experience with children," Elena said, her voice tightening. "But more than that, I understand the pain of losing someone. I live with it every day." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked toward the closed door of the girls' room. "Those children have been silent for 14 months, she said softly. "The boss has hired one expert after another. Psychologists from the best hospitals, specialists from Europe. No one's been able to do anything. They haven't said a word, not to anyone, not even to their father." Elena stared at the door, sealed shut. She thought of the 3 little girls on the staircase the day before, the emptiness in their eyes, their hands clutched together as if it were the only thing keeping them from vanishing. "Maybe they don't need anyone to fix them," Elena said slowly. She didn't look at Rosa. She looked at the door. "Maybe they just need someone who understands." Rosa didn't speak. She only looked at Elena with an expression that was hard to read. Something flickered there. Hope. Or maybe just desperation, reaching for anything it could hold. She turned away and kept leading Elena through the rest of the rooms that still needed cleaning. But they both knew that conversation hadn't been only about work. It had been about something much bigger, something neither of them dared to name yet. During the first week, Elena didn't try to do anything special. She just did her job, dusting, sweeping, folding clothes, but she did everything with a strange gentleness, as if this house were a patient recovering, as if one sudden movement might shatter something fragile. And she sang, not loudly, just small melodies, barely above a breath. Cielito Lindo, the song her mother used to sing her to sleep when she was little. I, canta y no lores. She sang while she wiped the stairs. She sang while she polished the banister. She sang while she folded bed linens. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was warm, and it was real. On the 3rd day, Elena was mopping the 2nd floor hallway when she felt someone watching her. She didn't turn around. She kept working, kept singing, but out of the corner of her eye, she saw her. Lucia, the oldest of the 3 sisters, standing in the doorway of their room, one hand holding the doorframe, watching Elena. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Lucia was still there. Not speaking, not moving, just watching. Elena wanted to turn around, to smile at the little girl, to say something. But she didn't. Instinct told her not to. Don't force it, don't push, just be there. So she kept singing, Porque cantando se alegran, cielito lindo, los corazones. When Elena finally glanced back, Lucia was gone. The door had closed again. But it was the first time in 14 months that one of the 3 girls had chosen to stand and watch someone for that long. In the 2nd week, something shifted. Elena was sitting in the laundry room, folding tiny little dresses. Dresses for the 3 girls, pink, purple, blue. She folded them carefully, as if they were treasures, and she sang, still, cielito lindo. Then she heard small footsteps. She didn't look up. She kept folding, kept singing. A small shadow appeared at the edge of her vision. Valentina, the 2nd girl. She walked into the room and sat down on the floor, about 3 feet from Elena. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, watching Elena fold the clothes. Elena kept working. She didn't look directly at Valentina. She only let a faint smile rest on her lips, as if she were smiling to herself, and she sang. Valentina stayed there for a full hour. Then she stood up and left, still without a word. But before she went, she looked back at Elena, just for a second, then disappeared. The next day, Mia appeared, the youngest. She stood in the laundry room doorway, head tilted, listening to Elena sing. She didn't come in. She only stood there, her head tipped to one side like a little bird trying to catch a faraway melody. Elena still didn't turn. She kept singing and folding, but her heart beat faster. Something was happening. Something was changing. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay on her bed in the small staff room in the basement, her mind spinning with the image of the 3 girls. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, she decided to get some water. She went up to the first floor, moving softly through the dark. The house was silent, except for the ticking of a clock somewhere. Then she heard a voice, from Dominic's study. The door was cracked open. A wash of yellow light spilled into the hallway. Elena knew she should turn back. She knew this wasn't her business, but her feet didn't listen. She stood there, hidden behind the wall, her heart pounding like a drum. "I don't care if he has a family," Dominic's voice cut through the air, cold, sharp, without a hint of feeling. "He betrayed me. He pays. That's the law." Silence. The person on the other end must have been saying something. Then Dominic spoke again. "Handle it. I don't want to hear his name again." Elena trembled. She backed away. Her foot caught on something. She almost fell. She clapped a hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Then she turned and ran back to her room, ran from what she'd just heard. She lay in bed all night, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her father. The men who killed him had spoken the same way. Cold, ruthless, as if a human life had no value. She was working for one of those men. She was living under the roof of a Mafia boss. The next morning, Elena got up early. Her eyes were swollen from lack of sleep. She went up to the second floor to start her work. And she saw him, Dominic, standing in the hallway outside his children's door. The door was slightly open. He stood there, not going in, only looking. Elena stopped at the corner of the corridor. She held her breath. From where she stood, she could see inside the room. The 3 girls sat on the bed, holding hands, staring into nothing, like every day, like the last 14 months. And she saw Dominic's face, the most powerful Mafia boss in New York, the man who'd given an order to kill last night without hesitation. His face was shattered, just for a second. Those cold eyes flared with pain. That square jaw trembled. His hand clenched at his side as if he were fighting not to collapse. Then he drew a deep breath and put the mask back on. His face went cold again. His eyes turned empty. He turned away and walked down the stairs, back straight, shoulders squared, as if nothing had happened. Elena stood there without moving, and she understood. There were 2 Dominic Russos, the monster on the outside, the man who ordered death without blinking, the man who made the entire underworld tremble. But there was another Dominic, the father who stood at his daughter's door every morning, the father broken because he couldn't reach his own children, the father powerless even with the whole world in his hands. Elena didn't know if she should be afraid of him or feel sorry for him. Maybe both. In the 3rd week, the first miracle happened. Elena was folding laundry in the washroom like she did every day. She worked as she sang Cielito Lindo, the song that had become the soundtrack of this house. When she lifted a stack of freshly washed sheets, she saw it, a piece of paper lying on top of the clean clothes. She picked it up. It was a drawing, made with crayons, a butterfly, purple, its wings uneven, its antennae bent, its body crooked. But to Elena, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She sat down on the floor, holding the picture with both hands, staring at it for a long time. She knew who'd drawn it, Lucia, the girl who'd watched her the longest, the one who'd been observing her since the very first days. And now, the child was standing behind the door. Elena didn't look back, but she knew. She could feel Lucia's eyes following her through the crack of the half-opened door. "So beautiful," Elena whispered, quiet enough that it felt like she was speaking to herself, but loud enough for Lucia to hear. "This butterfly is so beautiful." She stood, carried the drawing out of the laundry room, and walked straight to the kitchen, the huge kitchen with oak cabinets and granite counters. She looked around, searching for the perfect place, right on the wall beside the window where the morning light would fall every day. She took tape and fixed the drawing there, the most honored spot in the kitchen. She stepped back and looked at it. "Perfect," she murmured. From the edge of the hallway, a pair of eyes watched, Lucia. The girl had followed Elena from the laundry room to the kitchen, and when she saw her picture hanging on the wall, something flickered in those empty eyes. A spark, tiny, but real. Then she turned and vanished. The fourth week, Elena was standing in the sitting room, dusting the statues on the shelf, and she sang, as she always did. Cielito Lindo had become her breath in this house. She didn't hear footsteps, but she felt a presence, someone standing behind her. She didn't turn. She kept singing, kept dusting. Then she heard it. A whisper, small as a breath, fragile as a butterfly wing brushing the air. Sing. Just one word. Elena went still. Her hand stopped in midair. Her heart missed a beat, then raced twice as fast. That was the first word after 14 months of silence. One of the 3 girls had spoken. Mia, the youngest, the one who used to make up songs in the bathtub. Elena wanted to turn around, to pull the child into her arms, to cry, to run and call Rosa, call everyone, but she didn't. Instinct held her in place. She knew that if she reacted too strongly, she'd ruin everything. This fragile moment would burst like a bubble, so she only kept singing, her voice softer now, gentler, like she was rocking a newborn. Ay, 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 canta y no lores. Then she heard it. A tiny hum. Mia was singing along, not in words, only the melody, but she was singing. After 14 months of silence, Mia was singing. Elena kept going. She finished the song, then started again from the beginning. Mia hummed with her. The 2 of them stood there, backs turned to each other, singing the same song. No one looked at the other, but something was being stitched back together. An invisible thread, delicate, but real. In the 5th week, Elena was folding clothes in the girls' room. She was allowed in now. The 3 girls no longer shut the door when she came. She sat on the floor, folding tiny dresses, and she sang. A different song this time, a sadder one. The song her mother had sung in her final days. Lying in bed, eyes far away, remembering her husband, Valentina sat on the bed, watching Elena. The child didn't speak for a long time. Then, suddenly, she asked, "Why do you sing so sadly?" Elena stopped. She looked up. This was the first time Valentina had spoken to her. Her first sentence, not just a word, but a whole question. Elena set the dress she was folding down on the floor. She knelt so her eyes were level with the little girls on the bed. She didn't rush. She let the moment breathe. "Because sometimes sadness is beautiful too, sweetheart," she said gently. "It means we once loved someone very much, so much that when they're gone, we still remember. We still feel sad, because love doesn't disappear, just because the person we love isn't here anymore." Valentina was silent. Her big brown eyes held Elena's without blinking. Then she said, her voice as small as a falling leaf, "I'm sad too." Elena felt her heart tighten. "I know, Angel," she whispered. "I'm sad too." Valentina looked at Elena for a long time, as if she were searching for something in her eyes. Then she reached out. Her tiny hand touched Elena's cheek, a touch as light as a butterfly wing, warm and full of trust. Elena didn't move. She let that small hand rest on her face. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, because sometimes tears are beautiful too. They mean we can still feel. We're still alive. In the doorway, Lucia and Mia stood watching, hand in hand, their eyes no longer empty. Something was waking up in those eyes. Something that had died 14 months ago. Slowly, gently, coming back to life. In the 6th week, the wall of silence began to collapse. Not all at once, not with a single crash, but brick by brick, one at a time, slowly, gently, the way spring melts ice. Lucia was the first to speak of her mother. She was sitting beside Elena in the laundry room, watching her fold clothes, and then, all of a sudden, the little girl said that her mother used to sing too. Her voice was small and raspy, as if her throat had forgotten how to make sound after 14 months of not being used. She said their mother sang while she cooked, their mother sang while she bathed them, their mother sang so beautifully. Elena's hands paused, but she didn't turn to look at Lucia. She was afraid that if she looked, the child would stop. So she just kept folding, her voice soft, as she said that her mother must have been wonderful. Lucia went on, saying that her mother was so beautiful, that her mother had long black hair, that her mother had brown eyes like theirs, that her mother smiled all the time. The little girl's voice began to tremble. And then she said that her mother stopped smiling, and then her mother went away. Elena still didn't turn. She let Lucia talk. She let the words pour out like water that had been dammed for too long. finally finding a way to escape. The next day, Valentina asked the question no one dared to answer. She was sitting on the bed, watching Elena tidy the room, and she asked why their mother had to go. Her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a real question, painful and desperate. She said she'd asked Daddy, but Daddy didn't say anything. Daddy just walked out. Daddy never talked about Mommy. Elena sat down beside the bed. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't know the truth. She only knew the fragments she'd picked up from Rosa, from scraps of conversation. She told Valentina, slowly, that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and she didn't know why, and no one knew. But that didn't mean their mother wanted to leave. She told her that their mother loved them. That their mother loved them so much. Valentina looked at Elena, her eyes rimmed red, and asked how Elena knew. Elena said because no mother wanted to leave her children. Never. That night, Mia spoke about her mother for the first time. The youngest was lying in bed, eyes turned up to the ceiling, while Elena sat beside her, singing softly. And then Mia spoke, her voice dreamy, like she was talking inside a sleep she couldn't quite wake from. She said she missed the smell of her mother's hair, the smell of jasmine, that her mother held her every night. And Mia used to breathe in her mother's hair before she fell asleep, and now she couldn't remember that smell anymore. She tried to remember, but she couldn't. Elena felt her heart break into a million pieces. She reached out and stroked Mia's hair with a tenderness that almost shook. She whispered that Mia would remember. Maybe not with her nose, but she'd remember with her heart. And the things we love never truly disappear. They live in our hearts. Mia turned to look at Elena, and then the child cried, for the first time in 14 months. She cried out loud. Not the silent kind of crying, but real crying, sobbing, painful, freeing. Elena pulled her into her arms. In the doorway, Lucia and Valentina stood watching, and then they cried too. They climbed onto the bed and pressed into Elena's embrace. The four of them held on to one another and cried, crying for Isabella, crying for the months of silence, crying for all the pain they'd kept locked inside for too long. Elena cried with them. She cried for her father, for her mother, for Miguel, for herself. That night, for the first time, the pain was shared. And once it was shared, it felt a little less heavy. In the 8th week, the miracle happened. Laughter came back. Not once, but many times, every day. The girls began helping Elena with the house. Lucia helped fold laundry. She didn't fold neatly, but she tried so hard. Valentina helped water the plants. She asked the name of every flower, asked why leaves were green, asked why flowers needed water. Mia helped bake. Really? She got dough all over her face and licked sugar from the spoon. But she laughed, a bright giggle, clear as wind chimes. They sang together, the familiar song about sunshine that their mother used to sing. Elena carried the main melody. The 3 girls sang along. Their voices didn't match. Their words were sometimes wrong, but no one cared. The kitchen filled with music. One afternoon, Rosa stood outside the kitchen door. No one knew how long she'd been there. She looked inside. Mia was sitting on Elena's shoulders, her hands tangled in Elena's hair, laughing without stopping. Lucia and Valentina sat on the kitchen table, legs swinging, mouths open in song. Elena was folding tiny dresses, smiling as she sang along. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the window, laying warm gold over all of them. Lucia's purple butterfly drawing was still on the wall, a silent witness to everything that had happened. Rosa lifted a hand to cover her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. 14 months. 14 months of silence. No child psychologist had done it. No specialist had done it. No amount of money had done it. But this girl had done it. In 8 weeks. Rosa backed away from the kitchen door, her hand trembling as she took out her phone. She dialed Dominic's number. He was in Miami, a business trip that was supposed to last 2 weeks. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Dominic's voice came through. Clipped and cold, the way it always was. Asking what it was, Rosa. Rosa told him he should come home. He said he was busy, asked what was going on. Rosa wanted to say it, wanted to shout that his daughters were talking, laughing, singing, that a miracle had happened, that he needed to come back immediately. But she didn't. She was afraid he wouldn't believe her. She was afraid that if she spoke it out loud, the miracle would vanish. So she said, softly, that it was nothing, only that he should come home. Silence on the line, and then Dominic said he'd come back when he was finished, and he hung up. Rosa stared at the dark screen of her phone and let out a long breath. Then she turned and looked back toward the kitchen. The laughter was still there, rising and ringing inside the house, and she found herself wondering whether, when Dominic came home, he'd recognize the miracle unfolding under his own roof. or whether he'd destroy it, the way he'd destroyed so many other things in his life. Dominic came home earlier than expected. The deal in Miami ended faster than he'd thought. Or maybe something else had been pulling at him, urging him back. He didn't call ahead. A Mafia habit. You never announce your schedule. He walked into the familiar mansion. Silence, as always, as it had been for 14 months. But then he heard it. A sound, coming from somewhere inside the house. His heart sped up. His hand went to the gun at his side by reflex. But this wasn't the sound of danger. This was something else. Something he hadn't heard in this house for more than a year. He moved toward it, his feet barely touching the ground. It was coming from the kitchen. He stood in front of the kitchen door. His hand trembled as he put it on the knob. He pushed the door open, and his world stopped. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the big windows, laying a warm gold over the kitchen. Dust motes floated in the air like glitter, and in the middle of that light-filled room, he saw them. Mia was sitting on the shoulders of a woman, her small hands tugging at the woman's dark hair. Mia's mouth was wide open in a laughing squeal, a sound clear as a bell. Lucia and Valentina were sitting on the kitchen table, legs swinging, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with life. All three of them were singing. A familiar song about sunshine, the song Isabella used to sing to them every night. Their voices didn't match. Their words were sometimes wrong, but they were singing. His daughters were singing. On the wall, right beside the window, a crayon drawing had been taped in a place of honor, a purple butterfly with uneven wings. The woman was folding tiny dresses. She was smiling. She was singing along. She moved gently with the rhythm, making Mia laugh even harder on her shoulders. Elena, the housekeeper he'd only seen once in the hallway, the girl he hadn't even bothered to look at. Dominic's briefcase slipped from his hand. The sound wasn't loud enough for anyone in the kitchen to hear. They kept singing. They kept laughing. He stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. His daughters were talking. His daughters were laughing. His daughters were singing. After 14 months of absolute silence, after 14 months of watching them like ghosts, after 14 months of believing he'd lost them forever, for 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, joy flooded Dominic, relief so intense his chest felt like it might split open. Gratitude, a feeling he'd thought had died with Isabella, as if God had finally heard his prayers, as if miracles truly existed. He wanted to run in, to gather his girls into his arms, to cry, to tell them that Daddy loved them. Daddy loved them so much. Then Mia shouted, "Sing louder, Miss Elena! Miss Elena!" Her voice was pure happiness, pure trust, pure love, for that woman, not for him. And something shifted inside Dominic, fast, sudden, like someone flicking a switch in the dark. The joy vanished. In its place came something else, something darker. This woman had done what he couldn't. She'd brought his daughters back from the land of silence, while he, Dominic Russo, the most powerful mafia boss in New York, the man who made the whole underworld tremble, the man who'd erased an entire cartel for revenge, he hadn't been able to do a thing. He'd spent millions. He'd hired the best experts. He'd taken them everywhere. He'd bought them everything they could ever want. Nothing had worked. Then a housekeeper appeared, a girl with no name, no degrees, nothing at all, and she did what he couldn't. In 8 weeks. Jealousy. That was where it began. A small flame in his chest. Shame. Feeding the flame. He was their father. He should have been the one making them laugh. He should have been the one they called for. Not this strange woman. Anger. Igniting. Out of control. He looked at Elena, at the way she smiled at his daughters, at the way Mia tugged her hair with easy intimacy, at the way Lucia and Valentina looked at her with an expression they'd never once given him, and he hated her. He hated her because she'd done what he couldn't. He hated her because she'd shown him his own helplessness. He hated her because he couldn't hate himself. The darkness in Dominic Russo rose up, and it needed somewhere to pour itself out. What the hell is going on in here? Dominic's voice ripped through the kitchen like gunfire. No, worse than gunfire. This was the voice of a mafia boss. The voice that had ordered the execution of more enemies than anyone could count. The voice that made even the toughest criminals tremble. The singing stopped instantly, as if someone had pulled the plug. Silence slammed down on the kitchen, heavy enough to steal the air from your lungs. Mia on Elena's shoulders went rigid. Her face crumpled. Her tiny lips began to quiver. Her eyes went wide as she stared at the man in the kitchen doorway with pure terror. Elena felt her body shake, but she didn't panic. She carefully set Mia down on the floor, gently, slowly, as if she were handling a bomb that could go off at any second. "Sir, I was just," she started. "You were hired to clean," Dominic roared, cutting her off. He stepped into the kitchen, each footfall like thunder. "Not to turn my kitchen into a circus." Lucia and Valentina shrank back on the kitchen table. The two girls clutched each other's hands, eyes wide with horror. They'd never seen their father like this. They'd seen the Mafia boss, but they'd never seen that boss aim himself at the person they loved. Mia started to cry. A small, strangled sound of fear. She ran to hide behind Elena's legs, both hands gripping Elena's skirt. Elena stood tall. She didn't bow her head. She didn't step back. She'd lived through too much to collapse in front of an angry Mafia boss. "The girls were happy, sir," she said, her voice small but steady. "This is the first time in 14 months they've talked. They've laughed. They've sung. Can't you see that? I don't need you telling me what my children need." Dominic moved closer. His face was flushed. Veins stood out in his neck. His fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. "They're my children, not yours. You've got no right." Elena stepped back once, not from fear, but because Mia was hiding behind her and she needed to protect the child. But she didn't lower her gaze. She looked straight into Dominic's eyes, her brown eyes meeting his black, furious ones. "I'm the only one who's gotten them to speak again, sir," she said slowly, each word clear. "How many experts did you hire? How much money did you spend? No one could do it, but I did. In 8 weeks. You can fire me, but you can't deny that." Dominic went still. No one, in his entire career, in his entire life, had dared to speak to his face like that. His men wouldn't, his enemies wouldn't, even other bosses weighed every word when they spoke to him. But this girl, this nameless housekeeper, stood there and threw the truth at him. The truth he didn't want to hear. The truth that hurt him more than any bullet. His anger doubled. "You're fired," he snarled through his teeth. "Pack your things. Get out of here. Right now." She just stood there, looking at him. There was no fear in her eyes, no begging, only something that looked like disappointment and pity. That made Dominic even more furious. He didn't need anyone's pity, especially not from a housekeeper. Fast footsteps sounded in the hallway. Rosa ran in. She'd heard the shouting from the sitting room. "Boss," she gasped. "You don't understand. She's done what no one else could. The girls are talking. The girls are laughing. Please don't." "Shut up." Dominic turned. His stare pinned Rosa like he wanted to kill her. It was the stare he saved for enemies, not for the housekeeper who'd been with his family for 15 years. Rosa stepped back. Her legs shook. She grabbed the doorframe so she wouldn't fall. In 15 years with the Russo family, she'd never been afraid of Dominic. She'd seen him angry. She'd seen him cold. She'd seen him give terrible orders, but he'd never turned that cruelty on her, not until today. She didn't say another word. She just stood there, trembling, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. Dominic turned back to Elena. "Get out of my house," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Before I do something we'll both regret." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she bent down and gently pried Mia's hands off her skirt. The little girl cried louder. "Miss Elena, don't go, Miss Elena." Elena's heart splintered, but she couldn't stay. She knelt down to Mia's eye level and wiped the tears from her cheeks. "You'll be all right, Angel," she whispered. "You'll all be all right." Then she stood. She walked past Dominic, chin lifted, back straight. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but she didn't hide her face. She didn't plead. She walked out of the sun-drenched kitchen, leaving behind 3 little girls crying, a Mafia boss breathing hard with rage, and an old housekeeper trembling in the doorway. The kitchen that had just been filled with laughter now held only the sound of 3 children crying. Elena stood in the hallway for a moment. She'd just stepped out of the kitchen. The crying of the 3 little girls still echoed behind her. Her eyes were wet, tears running down her cheeks, but she didn't beg. She didn't plead. She didn't turn back. She'd survived watching her father get shot to death right in front of her. She'd survived her mother dying of grief. She'd survived her brother being set up, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. She'd survived 3 years alone, 2 jobs, night classes in college. Every dollar she earned poured into saving Miguel. She wasn't going to break in front of a Mafia boss, no matter how powerful he was, no matter how rich he was, no matter how terrifying he was. She turned to look at Dominic one last time. "Yes, sir. Just 2 words." Her voice was calm, not trembling, not choking. Then she left. She walked past Dominic, chin lifted, back straight, shoulders squared. Tears still slid down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, because tears didn't mean weakness. Tears meant she could still feel, that she was still human, unlike the man standing there. In the kitchen, the three girls stopped crying. Lucia moved first. She climbed down from the kitchen table, slowly, like a little machine. Valentina followed. Then Mia. The three girls stood in a line, holding hands, just like 14 months ago. Their faces were empty, as if someone had flipped a switch. The light in their eyes, the light Elena had spent 8 weeks trying to ignite, went out, in minutes. They looked at their father, but not with a daughter's eyes. With a stranger's eyes, cold, distant, hollow. Dominic felt a chill crawl up his spine, but before he could say anything, the three girls turned away. They walked out of the kitchen in silence, hand in hand, their tiny footsteps making no sound. They went back to their room like ghosts. Elena was going down the stairs when she saw the girls pass by. They didn't look at her, they didn't stop. They walked straight into their room and closed the door. She stood there for a moment. Then she stepped up to their door. She laid her hand on the wooden surface. She could feel the silence inside, heavy, painful, familiar. "Goodbye, my angels," she whispered. "I love you. I'll always love you." No answer. Only silence. The silence she'd fought to break for 8 weeks. The silence that had returned in minutes. Elena stood there a little longer, then lowered her hand. She turned away. She walked out the front door, across the yard, past the guards with faces hard as stone, past the 3-meter iron gate, out to the road, and she disappeared. Rosa stood in the second-floor hallway, watching Elena go. She didn't even know when she'd started standing there. She just stood, watching the young woman walk away with her back straight and her head held high. 15 years with the Russo family. She'd seen Dominic back when he was a hot-blooded young man with ambition burning in his eyes. She'd watched him build an empire from nothing. She'd watched him marry Isabella, the only woman who could make him smile. She'd seen him cry like a child when his 3 little girls were born. She'd seen him howl when Isabella lay in her coffin. She'd watched him turn cold and ruthless, drowning himself in work to outrun his grief. And now she'd watched him destroy the only thing that could save his children. She wiped the tears from her cheeks. Then she went to the girls' room. She knocked softly. No answer. She opened the door and stepped inside. The 3 girls sat on the bed, holding hands, staring into nothing, just like 14 months ago. As if nothing had ever changed. As if Elena had never existed. Rosa felt her heart shatter. She knelt in front of them. "Are you all right, my loves?" she asked gently. Lucia looked at her. Those big brown eyes were empty now, like 2 dark holes. No emotion, no life. Then the little girl turned her face to the wall. Without a word. Rosa stayed there on her knees for a long time. Then she stood and walked out. She went to find Dominic. He was in his study, sitting behind his desk, staring into nothing. An opened bottle of whiskey sat on the desk, a glass in his hand. Rosa walked in without knocking. For the first time in 15 years, she didn't ask permission. "Boss," she said, "you just fired the only person who got the girls to speak again." Dominic didn't look at her. He took a sip of whiskey. "Get out, Rosa." 14 months, boss," Rosa went on, her voice shaking but firm. 14 months, and no one could do anything. That girl did it in 8 weeks. 8 weeks. And you threw her out. For what? Pride? Jealousy? Get out, Dominic repeated, his voice hissing through his teeth. Rosa looked at him, tears running down her cheeks. "I will," she said. "But you should know this." The girls went silent again the second she walked out that door. They haven't said a word. They look at you like you're a stranger. And this time, boss, this time I'm not sure anyone can save them anymore. She turned and walked out, leaving Dominic alone in the dark room, with the bottle of whiskey, with the glass, and with the truth he didn't want to face. He destroyed the only thing left, not because of enemies, not because of danger, but because of his own jealousy and pride. The days that followed were hell. The silence came back, but this time it was worse, so much worse. Before, the girls had been silent with everyone. They didn't speak to anyone. They didn't look at anyone. They didn't react to anyone. But now their silence had a target. Dominic, they weren't just quiet. They refused him, completely, relentlessly. On the first morning after Elena left, Dominic tried to have breakfast with his daughters. He sat down at the table. The 3 little girls were already there, and in front of each of them was a plate of pancakes Rosa had made. They didn't eat. They didn't pick up their forks. They just sat there, staring at the food. The moment Dominic sat down, all 3 of them stood up, at the exact same time, as if they'd agreed on it beforehand. They walked out of the dining room, leaving Dominic alone with 4 plates of cold pancakes. On the second day, he tried to go into their room. He knocked. No answer. He opened the door and stepped inside. The 3 girls were sitting on the bed, holding hands, like always. But when he came in, all 3 turned their faces away, turned their backs to him, stared at the wall, as if he didn't exist, as if he were air. "Girls," he called, his voice rough. "Daddy's sorry. Daddy knows Daddy was wrong. Please look at Daddy." No response. They kept their backs turned, kept staring at the wall, kept silent. Dominic stood there for 15 minutes, saying everything, apologizing, begging, promising. Nothing changed. Finally, he stepped out, closed the door, and stood in the hallway with his hand braced against the wall, fighting not to collapse. On the 3rd night, Dominic couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Isabella, thinking about the happy days, thinking about the girls' laughter before the tragedy, thinking about Elena and how she'd brought that laughter back, and how he'd destroyed it. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, he got up. He went to the girls' room. He opened the door softly, trying not to make a sound. Moonlight streamed through the window, washing over the 3 little girls lying on the bed in a layer of silver. They lay pressed close together, hands still clasped, even in sleep. Dominic stood in the doorway, looking at them, his heart tightening. He stepped into the room, carefully, 1 step at a time. He stood beside the bed, looking down at 3 angel faces asleep. He wanted to touch them, to stroke their hair, to kiss their foreheads the way Isabella used to every night. He reached out. Then Lucia opened her eyes, the oldest, the one who'd always been the strongest, the one who protected her sisters. She didn't startle. She wasn't afraid. She just opened her eyes and looked straight into Dominic's. The moonlight reflected in those big brown eyes. And Dominic saw something that sent cold down his spine. Hate. Lucia opened her mouth and spoke, the first time since Elena left. "You sent Miss Elena away." Her voice was cold as ice, not trembling, not choking, only the truth, brutal and painful. "I hate you." 3 words, only 3 words, but they pierced Dominic like 3 bullets. Then Lucia turned her face to the wall and closed her eyes, as if she'd never woken up, as if she'd never said anything. Dominic stood there, frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move. He didn't know how long he stood there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. At last, he backed away, left the room, and closed the door. And that was the last time Lucia spoke to him. Dominic went straight to his study. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat down in the chair in the dark. He reached for the bottle of whiskey on the desk. He didn't pour it into a glass. He drank straight from the bottle. The liquor burned down his throat, but it wasn't hot enough to burn away the pain in his chest. On the desk, in a silver frame, Isabella was smiling at him. Beside her were their 3 little girls. The photo had been taken 6 months before Isabella was murdered. 4 bright smiles, 4 happy eyes, a perfect family. Now only a memory. Dominic picked up the picture. He looked into Isabella's eyes. "I failed, sweetheart," he whispered. "I failed the girls. I destroyed everything." And he cried. For the first time since Isabella's funeral. For the first time in 14 months. Tears ran down his face, the tears a Mafia boss never let anyone see. He cried for Isabella, for his daughters, for himself, for everything that had been lost. Then the pain turned into anger. He needed to pour it out. He needed to do something. He grabbed his phone and dialed Marco. "Find me someone," he said the moment Marco answered. "Anyone. I need to kill someone. I need to let this rage out. Find me a target." Silence on the other end. A long moment. Then Marco spoke, his voice steady, gentle, like he was talking to a friend, not his boss. "Killing doesn't bring the girls back, boss." Dominic went still. Marco went on. "You wiped out the Mendez cartel, every last one of them. Did that bring the boss's wife back? Did it make the girls speak again? Violence doesn't solve pain, boss. You know that." Dominic didn't answer. He just sat there with the phone pressed to his ear, tears still on his cheeks. Then he threw the phone at the wall. It shattered. Pieces flew everywhere. He sat in the dark, alone, with a bottle of whiskey half empty, with Isabella's picture, and with a truth he couldn't outrun. He'd destroyed the only thing left. Not because of enemies, not because of danger, but because of his own jealousy, pride, and stupidity. And this time, there was no one to take revenge on, no one to blame, only himself. Marco Benedetti had followed Dominic Russo for 15 years. 15 long years. Back to when they were both just street kids with nothing but anger and a hunger to climb. Marco remembered the first day they met. in a dark alley in Brooklyn, both of them trying to dodge the cops after a petty theft. They'd crouched behind a dumpster, hearts pounding like drums, eyes locked in the dark, and somehow they knew they were going to go a long way together. 15 years later, Dominic was the most powerful mafia boss in New York, and Marco was his right hand. He'd killed for Dominic, more times than he could count. He'd been ready to die for Dominic at any moment. He'd stood by Dominic through every rise and fall, through the days of building the empire, through the wedding to Isabella, through the day the 3 little girls were born, through Isabella's funeral, through 14 months of silence. Marco had seen Dominic in every state, furious, cold, ruthless, in pain. But last night, when Dominic called at 2 o'clock in the morning demanding someone to kill, Marco had seen something new. His boss was breaking, truly breaking. Not the kind that showed on the outside like when Isabella died, but the kind that shattered from the inside, the kind no one could see. But Marco saw it, because he knew Dominic better than anyone. The next morning, Marco came to the estate early. He found Dominic in the study. The door was open. The curtains were drawn tight. Darkness filled the room even though it was already daylight outside. Dominic sat behind the desk, still wearing the suit from yesterday. Unshaven, hair messy, eyes red and swollen. The whiskey bottle on the desk was empty. Isabella's photograph lay face down. He looked like a dead man. No, worse than a dead man. He looked like someone dying slowly who couldn't die. "Find her," Dominic said. His voice was raw, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "Find Elena Vasquez." Marco stood still. He didn't know how to react. After everything that had happened, after the way Dominic had treated that girl, now he wanted her found. "She didn't do anything wrong, boss," Marco said carefully. "You fired her. She left. She doesn't owe you anything." "I know." Dominic looked up at Marco, eyes red with pain. "I know she wasn't wrong. I was. I need to fix it. I need to find her. Please, Marco." Marco stared at his boss. In 15 years, he'd never heard Dominic say please to anyone. He nodded. "I'll find her." Then he turned and got to work. Marco was the best at this. Finding people, digging up information, following trails. He started with what he knew. Elena Vasquez, 27 years old, Puerto Rican, lived in the Bronx, hired by Rosa as a housekeeper 2 months ago. He dug deeper. He contacted his sources, people in the police, people in the underworld, people who knew everything that happened on New York streets. And he found it. Elena Vasquez, daughter of Antonio Vasquez, a mechanic in the Bronx, owner of a small auto repair shop on the corner of 17th Street. 3 years ago, Antonio Vasquez was shot dead right outside his shop. 3 bullets, chest, stomach, head. Reason: he refused to pay protection money. The gang responsible, Los Diablos. Marco went still when he read that name, Los Diablos. He remembered it. He remembered it too well. 2 years ago, the Russo family expanded into the Bronx. A small gang got in the way. Los Diablos. They ran protection, extortion, loan sharking, small time, but they refused to move aside. They thought they could stand up to the Russo family. They were wrong. Dominic ordered them cleaned up. Marco remembered that night. He led the team. They tracked Los Diablos to their base, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the Bronx. 23 men, that was the number of Los Diablos members. By the next morning, there was no one left. The whole gang had been erased in a single night. The news spread. Every small crew in the area understood the message. No one dared block the Russo family again. Marco sat in his car, staring at the report on his laptop screen. He read it again and again. Antonio Vasquez, killed by Los Diablos. Elena Vasquez, Antonio's daughter, working for Dominic Russo, the man who'd wiped out Los Diablos, the man who'd avenged her father without even knowing. Fate. Marco didn't believe in fate. He believed in guns, money, and power. But what was this if not fate? That girl came to work for the family that had avenged her father. That girl healed the children of the man who'd killed her father's killers. And that man threw her out without knowing any of it. Marco dug deeper. Elena's mother, Maria Vasquez, died 6 months after her husband's death. Official cause: heart failure. Real cause: grief. Elena's brother, Miguel Vasquez, 19 when he was arrested, sentenced to 10 years for drug and weapons possession. But the file showed suspicious points. The evidence appeared too perfect. The witness had a record. The public defender did almost nothing. It looked like someone had set him up. Elena Vasquez, 27, orphaned, brother in prison, alone, working 2 jobs, going to college at night, pouring every dollar into hiring a lawyer for her brother. And she could still bring laughter to 3 little girls she'd never met before. She could still love even after life had taken everything. Marco exhaled and closed the laptop. Then he drove back to the estate. Dominic was still in the study, still in the same clothes, still unshaven. But he looked more awake now, waiting. "Boss, there's something you need to know," Marco said. He sat in the chair across from Dominic and told him everything, about Antonio Vasquez, about the repair shop in the Bronx, about Los Diablos, about that night 2 years ago, about how it all connected. Dominic listened in silence, his face blank. When Marco finished, Dominic didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there staring into nothing, like he was trying to process what he'd heard. "Does she know?" Dominic finally asked. "That I killed the men who killed her father?" Marco shook his head. "No, no one knows. She doesn't know Los Diablos were wiped out by whom. She only knows her father was murdered, and no one was punished." Dominic closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, and Marco saw something on his boss's face. Not anger, not pain, but something like destiny, as if Dominic finally understood that everything happened for a reason. "Where is she now?" Dominic asked. Marco pulled out a slip of paper. "A small apartment in the Bronx, 3rd floor, 15th Street. She works 2 jobs, cafe in the daytime, cleaning offices at night, and she goes to college in the evenings." Dominic opened his eyes. He looked at Marco. "Take me there. Now," Marco asked. "Now." Dominic stood. For the first time in days, something stirred in his eyes. Not hope, not yet, but determination. Elena's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a worn-down building on 15th Street in the Bronx. The walls were damp with mold. The pipes were rusted, screeching every time someone in the building turned on a faucet. The paint was peeling. The wooden floorboards groaned under every step. The place had only one small bedroom, an even smaller bathroom, and a kitchen corner with an old refrigerator that hummed all night long. But it was Elena's home, the only place she could afford. On the wobbly wooden table by the window sat a simply framed photograph. Miguel, her brother. The picture was from his 18th birthday, a year before he was arrested. He was smiling, eyes bright, holding the cake Elena had saved for a month to buy. Beside the photo was a stack of papers, lawyer files, appeal forms, payment receipts, 3 years of paperwork, 3 years of hope, 3 years of failure. Elena looked at the picture every morning before she went to work. She looked at it every night before she fell asleep. It reminded her why she kept going, why she got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, why she worked 16 hours a day, why she didn't quit. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Elena was already at the cafe, a small place on a street corner, serving coffee and bread to the working people in the neighborhood. She worked there from 6 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Then she went home and rested for 2 hours. Then she went to college from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Then she cleaned offices from 6 o'clock in the evening to 12 o'clock at night, every day, 7 days a week. That had been her life for 3 years. That day, Elena was behind the counter making a cappuccino for a regular when she felt something off. She looked up, and her heart seemed to stop. Dominic Russo was sitting in the corner of the cafe, alone. No bodyguards, no armored SUV waiting outside. Only him, in a black suit, sitting there, watching her. Elena felt the blood rush to her heart. Her hand tightened around the espresso machine handle. He'd found her. He'd come here. For what? To get her fired from this job too? To threaten her? To punish her for daring to speak to his face? She wanted to run. Survival screamed in her head, telling her to drop her apron and bolt out the back door. But she didn't. She'd run enough. She'd lost enough. If a mafia boss wanted to do something to her, he'd do it whether she ran or not. So why be afraid? She took a deep breath. Then she kept making coffee. She served customers. She wiped tables. She washed cups. She did everything as normal, as if Dominic Russo didn't exist, as if he were only a ghost no one could see. Dominic sat there the whole morning. He ordered a black coffee. He didn't drink it. He only sat there watching Elena work. At 2 o'clock, Elena's shift ended. She took off her apron, hung it on the hook, and stepped out from behind the counter. She walked straight to the door without looking toward Dominic. But the moment she stepped onto the sidewalk, he was there, waiting. "I need to talk to you," Dominic said. His voice wasn't cold the way it had been before. It was tired, worn out, like the voice of a man who hadn't slept in many nights. Elena stopped. She looked at him. "What do you want, Mr. Russo?" she asked, her voice steady. "Did you come here to get me fired from this job too? Or are you planning to run me out of the city altogether?" Dominic flinched. like her words had punched him in the gut. I deserve that, he said quietly. You're right. I deserve it. Elena didn't answer. She just stood there, watching him, waiting. There's a small park nearby, Dominic said. Give me 10 minutes, please. Elena wanted to refuse. She wanted to turn away and walk back to her tiny apartment. She wanted to forget everything that had happened. But she didn't, because Rosa had called her last night. Rosa had told her about the 3 girls, about the silence, about the way they refused their father, about what Lucia had said. I hate you. And Elena couldn't stop thinking about it. She couldn't stop worrying about the 3 little angels she'd loved for those short 8 weeks. 10 minutes, she said. They walked to the park, a small patch of green with a few battered benches and a few maple trees dropping their leaves. They sat down, leaving space between them. Like strangers. My girls went silent again, Dominic began, his voice low and aching. The second you walked out the door. They haven't said a word. They won't look at me. They hate me. I know, Elena said. Rosa called me. Dominic turned to her. She called you? She's worried, Elena said. She doesn't know what to do. Silence for a moment. Then Dominic spoke. You know who I am, he said slowly. I'm Dominic Russo, a Mafia boss. The man people fear. The man who's killed more people than you can imagine. You know that. Elena looked him straight in the eyes. No flinching, no fear. I know who you are, Mr. Russo, she said. My whole Bronx knows who you are. Then why aren't you afraid? Dominic asked. Why do you dare talk to me like that? Why do you dare look me in the eye without shaking? Elena let out a soft laugh, a sad laugh, the kind that had seen too much suffering. Because I've already lost everything, Mr. Russo, she said slowly. My father was shot dead 3 years ago, right outside his shop, 3 bullets. He was the best man I've ever known. My mother died 6 months later. She couldn't survive it. Her heart broke. My brother Miguel, 19, was set up. He was sentenced to 10 years for a crime he didn't commit. He's rotting in there while I work 16 hours a day to pay lawyers. Elena stopped. She looked at Dominic. What else is there for you to take from me, Mr. Russo? She asked. My life? Take it. It isn't worth much anyway. But don't expect me to fear you. I've got nothing left to fear. Dominic looked at her, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not as the housekeeper, not as the girl who dared to speak to his face, but as a human being, someone who'd endured too much, someone stronger than anyone he'd ever met, even himself. Dominic looked at Elena for a long time. Then he said it. I was wrong. His voice was low and heavy. I was jealous. You did what I couldn't. You made my daughters speak again. You made them laugh. You made them sing. And I, instead of being grateful, I was jealous. I was angry. I destroyed everything. Elena didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, at the maple leaves drifting down slowly in the late afternoon wind. You're right, she said. You destroyed everything. Silence. The wind moved through the park, carrying the smell of rotting leaves and exhaust from the street. I want you to come back, Dominic said. Elena turned to look at him, for the first time since they'd sat down. What? Come back. Work for me. Stay with my daughters. You're the only one who can help them. You're the only one they trust. Please. Elena gave a small laugh, a laugh with no warmth in it. I can't, Mr. Russo. Dominic leaned toward her. I'll pay double. No. Triple. No. 10 times. Any number you want. Just say it. Elena stood up. She faced Dominic again, her eyes flashing with something like anger. You think this is about money? She asked, her voice higher now. You think you can buy me with money? Do you know what it felt like? Being thrown out like a criminal, in front of children I loved, in front of 3 little girls I spent 8 weeks trying to heal. Do you know the look in their eyes when I walked out? Do you know Mia's crying still haunts me every night? Elena stopped. She drew a deep breath. I'm working 2 jobs to pay a lawyer for my brother, she said, her voice dropping. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I go to bed at 1 o'clock. I'm so tired sometimes I forget how to breathe. But every night, before I sleep, I still think about those 3 little girls. I still worry about them. I still pray for them, even after you threw me out like a dog. She looked straight into Dominic's eyes. Sorry isn't enough, Mr. Russo. Money isn't enough. Nothing is enough. She turned away and started to walk, her feet finding the stone path toward the park gate. She would go home. She would forget all of it. She would keep living, the way she always had. Your brother. Dominic's voice came from behind her. Elena froze. Her foot stopped mid-step. Her heart missed a beat. She turned back. "What did you just say?" Dominic stood up. He walked toward her. "Miguel Vasquez," he said slowly. "Your brother. 22 years old. Serving a 10-year sentence at Sing Sing for possession of drugs and illegal weapons. But he didn't do it. He was set up." Elena felt heat rush into her face. Her hands curled into fists. "You investigated me?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "You dug through my life? And now what are you doing? Bribing me, using my brother to force me back." "Who do you think you are?" Dominic shook his head. "No." Elena stopped. She stared at him, eyes still sharp with suspicion and fury. "No? No," Dominic repeated. "I'm not bribing you. I'm going to help your brother, whether you come back or not." Elena couldn't speak. She just stood there, staring at him, her mouth slightly open. "What?" "I've got the best lawyers," Dominic said. "I've got connections in the justice system. I can find out who set your brother up. I can reopen the case. I can get him out of there." "But why?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you help? You don't owe me anything." "I don't owe," Dominic said, nodding. "But it's the right thing. I've done too many wrong things in my life. The blood on my hands will never wash off. But at least I can do one thing right. I can help an innocent person get out of a place he doesn't belong. I'm not asking you to give me anything in return." Elena looked at him. Her eyes began to redden. Her lips trembled. "Miguel," she said, her voice catching. "He's only 22. He didn't do anything wrong. He just wanted to be an engineer. He had dreams. He had his whole life ahead of him, and they took it all. For 3 years I've tried to save him. For 3 years I've worked myself sick. For 3 years I've spent every dollar on lawyers. And nothing changed. Nothing." Tears started to run down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall. "I know," Dominic said softly. "And I'm going to help. No conditions, no trade, whether you come back or not. I'm still going to help Miguel. That's a promise." Elena stared at him, searching those dark eyes for deceit, for a scheme, but she couldn't find it. She saw only exhaustion, regret, and maybe for the first time, sincerity. She didn't know what to say. She just stood there with tears streaming down her face, looking at the man she'd hated minutes earlier, and wondering if he was changing, or if she was being fooled again. Elena stood there for a long time, tears still wet on her cheeks. The late afternoon wind moved through the park, colder now. Then she did something she didn't expect from herself. She turned back, she walked to the bench, and she sat down. Dominic looked at her without speaking. He sat down too, a little distance away, the way it had been before. Elena studied him. For a long time, she was trying to read him, to understand him, to find out who he really was beneath the mask of a Mafia boss. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was calmer now, no longer angry, only curious. "Why would you help Miguel even if I don't come back? What do you get out of it?" Dominic looked down at his hands. Hands that had signed so many death orders. Hands that had shaken hands with the devil. Hands that had built an empire on other people's blood and tears. "Because I've destroyed too many things in my life," he said slowly. "I've taken too much. Lives, families, futures. The blood on my hands will never wash off. I know that. I'll pay for what I've done, sooner or later." He looked up at Elena. "But at least I can do one right thing. Just one. Help an innocent man get out of a place he doesn't belong. It doesn't erase my sins, but at least it tells me I can still do something good, that I can still be human." Elena was silent. She looked toward the maple trees shedding their leaves, yellow and red, falling slowly like autumn's tears. "You know, Mr. Russo," she said, her voice as light as the wind. "I hate you." "I know," Dominic said. "I hate the way you treated me," Elena went on. "I hate the way you screamed in that kitchen. I hate the way you terrified those 3 little girls. I hate the way you think money can buy everything." "I know," Dominic repeated, not defensive, not explaining, only accepting. "But I love those children," Elena said. "I love Lucia with her pretend strength, trying to protect her sisters. I love Valentina with her endless why questions. I love Mia with her tiny singing voice and her clear laughter. 8 weeks. I was with them for only 8 weeks, but I love them like they're my own." She turned to look at Dominic. "So I'm going to tell you this. If I come back, you've got to change. Really change. Not the kind where you say sorry and forget. Real change." Dominic frowned. "Change how?" "You've got to be home," Elena said, her voice firm. Actually home. Not the kind where you drop in for a few hours and fly off to Miami, Chicago, Las Vegas. Home. With your girls. Eat breakfast with them. Eat dinner with them. Read them books before bed. Know your kids' friends' names. Know what songs they like. Know what they're afraid of. What they love. What they dream about. They don't need a mafia boss. They need a father. Dominic opened his mouth to argue. My work. Your work stole their mother. Elena cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. Dominic went still. Isabella died because of who you are. Elena continued. Because of the empire you built. Because of the enemies you made. Blood calls for blood, Mr. Russo. You kill people. Someone kills your people. That's the law of the world you live in. And Isabella paid the price. She stopped and drew a deep breath. Don't let your daughters pay any more. Don't let your work steal their father too. They've already lost their mother. Don't let them lose you. Dominic looked at Elena, his eyes full of pain. You're asking me to give up everything, he said softly. Give up the empire I've built for 15 years. Give up the power. Give up all of it. Elena shook her head. No, she said. I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm asking you to choose. She held his gaze. Your daughters. Or your empire. You can't have both. You tried. And you failed. Isabella died. The girls were silent for 14 months. You almost lost them forever. So choose, Mr. Russo. Choose. For once in your life, not the thing that gives you power. Not the thing that gives you money. The thing that truly matters. Dominic didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at Elena, as if she'd placed a question in front of him that he'd spent his whole life running from, and now he couldn't run anymore. Elena looked at Dominic for a long time. Then she stood. 2 days, she said. I'll give you 2 days. 2 days to prove you truly want to change. If you can do it, I'll come back. If you can't, don't look for me again. Dominic nodded. 2 days. I'll prove it. Elena didn't say anything else. She turned and walked out of the park. She didn't look back. Dominic stayed there a little longer, watching her disappear behind the line of trees. Then he stood, took out his phone, and called Marco. I'm not going anywhere this week, he said the moment Marco picked up. You handle everything. Silence on the other end. Everything, boss? Marco asked, his voice full of disbelief. Everything, Dominic confirmed. The deal in Chicago, the meeting in Atlantic City, the Gambino problem. All of it. You handle it. I trust you. Boss, what's going on? I'm trying to save what's left of my family, Marco, Dominic said. That's what's going on. Then he hung up. On the first day, Dominic woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He couldn't remember the last time he'd woken up in this house without rushing to the airport. He went down to the kitchen. Rosa was preparing breakfast. She looked at him with undisguised surprise. Boss, you're not going to work today? I'm making breakfast, Dominic said. For the girls. Rosa's eyes widened. But boss, you can't cook. I'll learn. Rosa didn't say anything else. She stepped back and let Dominic have the kitchen. He looked around. The refrigerator. The gas stove. The pan. Eggs. Bread. He could do this. He'd built an empire from nothing. He could make breakfast. 30 minutes later, he put 3 plates of burnt eggs and scorched toast on the table. Rosa looked at the food with quiet misery, but she didn't speak. The 3 little girls came down for breakfast, like always. They sat at the table. They stared at the burnt eggs. Then they looked up and saw Dominic standing there in the kitchen wearing an apron, his hands still smeared with butter. They didn't eat. They didn't pick up their forks. But this time, they didn't stand and walk away. They stayed seated, watching him longer than usual, as if they were trying to understand what was happening. Dominic sat down with them. He didn't speak. He just sat there, present. For the first time in 14 months, he was truly present. On the second day, Dominic didn't leave the house. He didn't go into his study. He didn't open his laptop. He put his phone in a drawer and didn't look at it all day. In the afternoon, he sat in the sitting room. The 3 girls were playing in the corner, playing in silence, as always. Dominic sat on the sofa, a few meters away. He didn't try to talk. He didn't try to force them into anything. He just sat there, watching them, present, the way Elena had been in those first weeks. An hour passed. 2 hours. 3 hours. Dominic was still there, patient, silent. Near the end of the day, when the late afternoon light began to fade, something happened. Mia, the youngest, was playing with a doll. She stood up and walked toward Dominic, slowly, step by small step. Dominic didn't move. He didn't dare breathe. Mia stopped in front of him and looked up, big brown eyes meeting her father's dark ones. Then she reached out and touched his hand, just for a second, a touch as light as a butterfly. Then she pulled her hand back, turned around, and ran to her sisters. But that 1 second was enough. Dominic felt tears gather in the corners of his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. That night, Dominic went into the girls' room before bedtime. The 3 little girls were lying on the bed, holding hands, like always. He sat down beside the bed. "Girls," he said gently, "Daddy has something to say." No response, but he knew they were listening. "Miss Elena is coming back," he said. "Daddy found her. Daddy apologized. She's going to come back." Lucia turned her head, for the first time since the night she'd said, "I hate you." "Really?" she asked. Her voice was small, suspicious, but there was a thin, fragile thread of hope inside it. "Really, sweetheart," Dominic said, his voice catching. "She's coming back. And Daddy's going to be here too. Daddy's going to stay home more. Daddy's going to be with you. I promise." Lucia stared at him. "You've promised a lot," she said. "You promised you'd take us to the park. You didn't. You promised you'd read to us. You didn't. You always promise." Dominic swallowed hard. His throat felt like it was closing. "You're right," he said. "Daddy's promised a lot and didn't keep it. I'm sorry. But this time is different, sweetheart. This time Daddy's going to prove it. Not with words, with actions. Daddy's going to be here. Every day. I promise. And I'm going to keep this promise." Lucia looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned her face away. She didn't say anything else. But she didn't say, "I hate you." And for Dominic, that was enough. That was a beginning. The 3rd day. Early morning. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The sky was still washed in the pink and orange of dawn. The 3 little girls were already awake. They didn't know why. They only knew that today was special. They stood at the living room window, 3 small faces pressed to the glass, 6 eyes fixed on the driveway that led to the gate, waiting. Rosa stood behind them, smiling. She didn't say a word. She just stood there watching the girls, and for the first time in days, she felt her heart warm. Dominic stood at the living room doorway. He was waiting too. He hadn't slept last night. He'd lain in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if Elena would truly come back, if she would give him a second chance, if he deserved it. 8 o'clock in the morning. A taxi stopped at the gate. The iron gate opened slowly. A figure stepped inside. "She's here," Mia shouted. It was the first thing the child had said since Elena left. Lucia and Valentina didn't speak, but their eyes lit up, as if someone had flipped a switch. Elena walked up the stone path to the front door. She wore a simple white dress. Her hair was tied neatly at the nape of her neck. She didn't carry much, only a small shoulder bag. Rosa opened the door before Elena could knock. She stood there looking at the young woman, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving them a second chance." Then she hugged Elena, held her tight, like she was holding a daughter who'd come home after being gone too long. Elena hugged her back, her own eyes wet. "Thank you for calling me," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up." Rosa let her go, wiped her tears, and stepped aside. "The girls are waiting for you." Elena walked in. She moved through the hallway, past the expensive paintings she'd dusted so many times, past the bookshelves she'd straightened again and again. She stopped at the living room entrance. Inside, Dominic was sitting on the sofa. The 3 girls sat beside him. He was holding a children's book, trying to read, but the girls weren't looking at the pages. They were watching the doorway, waiting. Elena stepped in. "Hello, my little angels," she said, her voice warm, gentle, familiar. The 3 girls turned. They saw her, and it was as if the world exploded. "Miss Elena, Miss Elena, Miss Elena," all 3 screamed at once. Their voices filled the room, filled the house, filled the whole universe. They jumped off the sofa and ran to Elena like 3 little storms, like 3 bullets, like 3 angels set free. Elena dropped to her knees. She opened her arms wide and caught all 3 of them. They crashed into her, clinging to her as if they were afraid she would vanish again. "We thought you were gone," Valentina cried. "We missed you so much," Mia sobbed. "Why did you leave? Why didn't you stay?" Lucia asked, her voice shaking. Elena held them tight, tears running down her cheeks. She kissed their hair, their foreheads, their cheeks. "I'm here," she whispered. I'm sorry I left. I shouldn't have. I should have stayed. I'm sorry, my loves. Will you forgive me?" "Yes." All 3 answered together. "We forgive you." Elena smiled through her tears. She hugged them tighter, like she was trying to make up for every day she hadn't been with them. Lucia lifted her face to Elena, big brown eyes still wet. "Are you staying?" she asked, her voice small, fragile, afraid. "Are you staying with us? Are you leaving again?" Elena looked at Lucia. Then she looked up at Dominic. He was still sitting on the sofa. The book had fallen to the floor. He wasn't holding it anymore. He was only sitting there watching Elena and the girls, tears streaming down his face. The most powerful mafia boss in New York, the man who made the whole underworld tremble, was crying like a child. Elena looked at him. He nodded, slowly, firmly. Elena turned back to Lucia. "I'm staying," she said. "I promise. I'm not leaving again. I'm going to be here, with you, every day." Lucia stared at her, then wrapped her arms around Elena again. This time, there was crying, real crying. The crying of a child who'd held pain too long and was finally being released. Valentina suddenly spoke. "Daddy found Miss Elena, didn't he?" she asked, turning to Dominic. "Daddy went looking for Miss Elena?" Dominic stood. He walked over slowly and knelt beside Elena and the girls. "I did," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Daddy found Miss Elena. Daddy apologized to her. Daddy asked her to come back, because Daddy loves you, because you need her, and because Daddy was wrong." Lucia looked at him for a long time. Then she did something Dominic never would have dared to dream. She reached out and took his hand, her tiny hand wrapping around his big hand, calloused and scarred. "Are you staying with us too?" Lucia asked. "Like Miss Elena? Are you going to be home?" Dominic felt his heart break open and piece itself back together. "I'm staying," he said, his voice choked. "I promise. I'm going to be home, with you, every day." Valentina reached out and took Dominic's other hand. Then Mia climbed into his lap and hugged his neck. Dominic Russo, Mafia boss, a man who'd killed more people than he could count, a man who'd built an empire on blood and tears, a man who made the underworld tremble, was kneeling on the floor, crying the way he'd never cried before. His 3 little girls clung to him. Elena sat beside them with tears on her face. Rosa stood in the doorway, crying without a sound. And for the first time in 14 months, the mansion wasn't silent anymore. It was full of tears, laughter, voices, the sound of love coming back to life. 6 months passed. 6 months since the day Elena came back. 6 months since the day Dominic knelt on the floor and cried with his children. Everything had changed. Dominic Russo was still a mafia boss. He still controlled the ports, the underground casinos, and half the protection operations in Manhattan. His empire was still there, but he wasn't the one running it directly anymore. He handed most operations to Marco. Marco flew to Chicago. Marco met with the Gambinos. Marco handled problems in Atlantic City. Dominic supervised from a distance. 4 days a week, he worked from home, sitting in his study for only a few hours in the morning. The rest of the time, he gave to his daughters. He knew the names of their teachers. Miss Thompson taught Lucia. Miss Martinez taught Valentina and Mia. He knew the names of their friends. Sophie, Emma, and Olivia were Lucia's close group at school. He knew the songs they loved. Mia still adored Disney songs. Valentina liked pop music. Lucia had started listening to Taylor Swift. He was there at breakfast. No more burnt eggs and scorched toast. Rosa had taught him basic cooking. His pancakes were edible now. He was there at dinner, sitting at the head of the table, listening to the girls tell him about their day at school. Who did what, who said what, who played with whom. He was there for bedtime stories, sitting on the edge of their bed, reading. His voice wasn't as good as Elena's, but the girls didn't care. They just needed him there. Elena was no longer only the housekeeper. She became part of the family. The girls called her Aunt Elena. She ate dinner with them, not in the kitchen like staff, but at the table, with the family. She went on picnics with them on weekends, Central Park, the Hamptons, the Russo family's private beach on Long Island. She read to the girls before bed, alternating with Dominic. One night him, one night her. And she taught Dominic something important. How to listen. Don't try to fix everything, Mr. Russo. She told him one night after the girls were asleep. Sometimes the girls just need someone to listen. No solution, no advice, just someone sitting there, hearing them. Dominic was used to solving problems. That was his work. Someone caused trouble. He handled it. Someone stood in his way. He removed them. But with his daughters, that way didn't work. He couldn't kill their sadness. He couldn't buy peace for them. He could only be there, listen, and love. 4 months after Elena returned, Dominic kept his promise. Miguel Vasquez was freed. Dominic hired the best lawyers in New York. Not the kind of public defenders who went through the motions, but top lawyers, the kind who could overturn any case. They dug into the file. They found inconsistencies. The evidence was planted too perfectly. The witness had a record and connections to a rival gang. Miguel's fingerprints weren't on the gun or the drugs that had been found. They filed an appeal. They presented new evidence. They put pressure on the system. 4 months later, Miguel Vasquez walked out of Sing Sing, a free man. Elena waited outside the prison gate. She'd been there since early morning, even though the release hearing was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't wait at home. She had to be here. Her hands shook. Her heart beat so hard she could hear it in her ears. 3 years. 3 years she'd waited for this day. 3 years she'd worked like a madwoman. 3 years she'd prayed every night. And now it was happening. The heavy iron gate began to open. Elena held her breath. A figure appeared. Miguel, her brother, 22 years old, thinner than she remembered, paler, but his eyes were still bright. The eyes of the 19-year-old boy who'd dreamed of becoming an engineer were still there. "Sis!" Miguel called, his voice breaking. Elena didn't wait another second. She ran to him. She wrapped her arms around her brother, holding him like she was afraid he would vanish, holding him like 3 years of separation had been pressed into one moment. "You're home," she sobbed. "You're home. You're home." Miguel hugged her back. He cried too. The two of them stood there in front of the prison gates, holding each other and crying, not caring who was watching, not caring about anything else. Dominic stood beside the black car parked not far away. He didn't come closer. He didn't intrude on this moment. He just stood there in silence, watching Elena and her brother. After a long time, Miguel lifted his head. He saw Dominic. He saw the expensive car. He saw the perfect suit. He knew at once this wasn't an ordinary man. "You're the one who?" Miguel asked, looking at Dominic. "I'm the man who owes your sister a great deal," Dominic said. "She saved my family. Helping you is the least I can do." Miguel looked at Dominic, then at Elena. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood one thing. This man had helped pull him out of hell. "Thank you," Miguel said. "Whoever you are, thank you." Dominic nodded. "Don't thank me. Live a good life. That's how you thank me." They got into the car. Dominic drove. Elena and Miguel sat in the back. The two siblings held hands the whole way home. They didn't say much. They just held on and felt each other's presence. In the weeks that followed, something shifted between Dominic and Elena. No one said it out loud, but everyone saw it. Rosa saw it. Marco saw it. Even the girls saw it. Lingering looks that lasted a little too long. When Elena crossed the living room, Dominic's eyes followed her. When Dominic spoke, Elena listened as if every word mattered. Late-night conversations on the porch after the girls were asleep. They sat there drinking tea, talking about everything and nothing. About life, about dreams, about fear, about wounds that hadn't healed. They didn't talk about love. They didn't talk about the future. They only talked. But in the silences between their words, something was growing. Something warm. Something no one dared to name yet. One Saturday afternoon, the sun was sinking low. The western sky was washed in orange and pink, like someone had spilled watercolor across a giant canvas. Dominic went looking for his daughters. He checked the living room, the playroom, their bedroom. No one. Then he heard laughter, coming from the backyard. He stepped onto the porch and saw them. Elena and the 3 little girls were kneeling in the soil, hands smeared with mud, clothes streaked with dirt, and no one cared. They were laughing, that clear, bright laughter echoing through the garden. Dominic walked closer. "What are we planting?" he asked. 4 faces lifted to him, 4 shining smiles. "Sunflowers, Daddy," Mia shouted, holding up her muddy hands like a trophy. Aunt Elena said Mommy liked sunflowers, Lucia added. "So we're planting them for Mommy, so Mommy can see them from heaven." Dominic felt his throat tighten. He looked at Elena. She was watching him with gentle eyes. She gave a small nod, as if telling him it was all right. He knelt down beside his daughters. His knees sank into damp earth. His expensive suit picked up mud. He didn't care. "Your mom loved sunflowers," he said, his voice thick. "So much. She said they were the most beautiful flowers." Valentina looked up at him. "Why did Mommy like them, Daddy? Why sunflowers and not roses or tulips?" Dominic was quiet for a moment. He looked at the tiny seeds in the packet. Then he looked up at the sky, turning purple. Your mom once told Daddy something, he began. She said sunflowers always turn toward the light, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how black the clouds are, no matter how hard the storm comes. Sunflowers still face the sun. They don't give up. They don't turn away. They keep searching for the light. She said that's how we should live. No matter how dark life feels, always turn toward the light. Lucia looked at her father. Like us, she said softly. We're like sunflowers, aren't we, Daddy? We were in the dark for a long time, but then we found the light. Dominic pulled his daughter into his arms. That's right, sweetheart, he whispered. Just like you. You found the light. And Daddy did too. They stayed there, all 5 of them, in the garden, sinking into sunset. Their hands kept working, digging, dropping seeds, watering, working together, like a family. Then Mia shouted, Daddy, look. She pointed up at the sky. Everyone looked. A butterfly, purple, drifting above them. It settled on the sunflower seed packet, its violet wings shimmering in the last light of day. It stayed for a few seconds, as if watching them, as if checking to see if they were all right. The girls went silent, staring at the butterfly in awe. Mia whispered, her voice small as breath. It's Mommy, isn't it? Mommy came to visit us, didn't she? Elena reached out and gently stroked the child's hair. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly. Mommy's watching you. Mommy's always here, in the wind, in the sunshine, in butterfly wings. Mommy never leaves you. The purple butterfly lifted off. It circled them once, as if hugging them with its fragile wings. Then it flew away, toward the setting sun, toward the light. The girls watched until it disappeared into the dusk. Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Marco. There must be something, a deal, a problem, something that needed him. Before, he would have answered immediately. Before, work was always the first priority. But this wasn't before anymore. He pressed the power button and shut it off. He slipped it back into his pocket. Elena looked at him. She smiled. It doesn't matter, Dominic said. Nothing matters more than this. Lucia looked up at her father. Are you staying? She asked. Really staying? Not staying today and leaving tomorrow. Staying for real. Forever. Dominic pulled all 3 girls into his arms and held them tight, like he never wanted to let go. I'm staying, he said. I promise. I'll be here with you, every day, until I can't breathe anymore. I promise. And this time I'm going to keep it. He lifted his eyes to Elena, the woman who'd saved his family, the woman who brought light back into this dark house, the woman who gave him a second chance he didn't deserve. Thank you, he said, his voice breaking. Thank you for everything. Elena shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. Don't thank me, she said gently. Thank God. He brought me here. He let us meet. He gave us a second chance. They stayed there in the garden as the sunset faded. 5 people, 1 family, not perfect. Full of wounds, full of scars, but healing, one day at a time. And in the sky, a purple butterfly was flying toward the sun. True wealth isn't what you build, whether it's an empire or a kingdom. It's who you become. And the most precious thing in this life isn't power, money, or the fear of your enemies. It's love that stays, even in silence, even in darkness, even when your hands are stained with blood. Love stays, like a sunflower always turning toward the sun, always turn toward the light. No matter what you've done in the past, no matter how badly you've failed, there's always a chance to change. There's always a chance to love. There's always a chance to come home. Because what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share this video so more people can hear meaningful stories like this every day. How did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of something in real life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We always want to hear what's deep in your heart. I wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace. Thank you so much. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.